The evening light filtered through the bedroom window in amber ribbons, touching the edges of worn furniture and casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Maya stood at the mirror, adjusting the collar of her nurse's scrubs, navy blue with her hospital ID clipped to the breast pocket. Her reflection stared back at her with tired eyes, the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. Outside, a car door slammed, then another. The sounds were sharp, deliberate, like punctuation marks in a sentence she didn't want to finish reading. She moved to the window, pulling back the sheer curtain just enough to see without being seen. 3 police cruisers sat in her driveway, their lights off, but their presence loud enough to wake every nerve in her body. Officers stood beside them, hands resting near their belts, talking among themselves with the casual posture of men who had done this before. Behind them, near the mailbox, stood her neighbor, Mrs. Catherine Sullivan, the woman who had brought over banana bread on moving day, who waved from her porch every morning, who had called Maya sweetheart more times than she'd called her by name. Catherine was pointing, not at Maya's house exactly, but toward it, her finger extended like an accusation, her mouth moving in explanations Maya couldn't hear but could somehow feel in her chest. The radio on Maya's dresser played softly, some old jazz tune her mother used to hum while cooking. The saxophone notes seemed suddenly wrong, too smooth for this moment, too gentle for the way her heart hammered against her ribs. She let the curtain fall back into place and stood in the dimming light of her bedroom, her hands trembling just slightly, her mind racing through every interaction she'd had with Catherine over the past 6 months. Had she smiled enough, waved back quickly enough, kept her music too loud on Saturday nights, let her lawn grow an inch too tall? What had she done to deserve 3 police cars in her driveway? Outside, a radio crackled. Footsteps approached the front door. Maya closed her eyes and took one long breath, the kind they taught her in nursing school when a patient coded and panic tried to take over. Steady yourself. Think clearly. Survive this moment, then the next. But the question remained, hanging in the air like smoke. What had Catherine told them about the black woman who lived next door? 6 months earlier, Maya Bennett had pulled up to the house on Maple Ridge Drive with everything she owned packed into a U-Haul and a second-hand sedan. The neighborhood was the kind of place that showed up in magazines about America's best small towns. Tree-lined streets, Victorian-style homes with wraparound porches, flower beds that looked professionally maintained even when they weren't. It was quiet, safe, the kind of place where people left their garage doors open and kids rode bikes without helmets until the streetlights came on. It was nothing like the neighborhood where Maya had grown up. She'd saved for 3 years to afford the down payment on this house, a modest 2-bedroom craftsman with good bones and a mortgage that stretched her budget thin. But it was hers. After working double shifts at County General, after living in apartments where the walls were thin and the landlords indifferent, after proving to every loan officer that, yes, a single black woman in her 30s could be a good investment, she had done it. The house needed work. The porch steps sagged slightly. The kitchen hadn't been updated since the 90s. But standing in the empty living room on that first day, sunlight streaming through windows she would soon clean, Maya had felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Catherine Sullivan had appeared on the second day, materializing on the front porch with a Tupperware container of banana bread and a smile that seemed genuine. She was in her late 50s, with silver blonde hair cut in a practical bob and the kind of face that could have been pretty once but had settled into something more comfortable. She wore a floral print dress and sensible shoes, and she spoke with a slight southern accent that softened her consonants. "I saw you moving in yesterday," Catherine said, extending the container. "Thought you might need something homemade after all that unpacking. I'm Catherine, Katie to friends, and I live right there. She pointed to the house directly across the street, a pale yellow Victorian with white trim and a garden that looked like it required daily devotion. Maya had accepted the bread with genuine gratitude. It was still warm. "Thank you so much. I'm Maya Bennett." "Well, Maya Bennett, welcome to the neighborhood. It's mostly retirees and young families around here. Quiet folks. We look out for each other." Catherine's eyes, pale blue and steady, swept over Maya's face with what seemed like friendly curiosity. "What brings you to Maple Ridge?" "Work, mostly. I'm a nurse at County General. Easier commute from here than from where I was living." "A nurse? Oh, how wonderful! We need more people like you." Catherine patted Maya's arm in a gesture that felt both maternal and slightly presumptuous. "You let me know if you need anything. Recommendations for contractors, where to shop, anything at all. I've been here 20 years. I know everyone." That last line hung in the air just a moment too long, weighted with meaning Maya couldn't quite decode. But she smiled anyway, because the bread smelled like cinnamon and kindness, and she wanted to believe that this place, this neighborhood, this life could be different. Over the following weeks, Catherine became a regular presence. She waved from her porch every morning as Maya left for her shift. She commented on the progress of Maya's landscaping efforts. She mentioned more than once how lovely it was to see new people moving into the neighborhood, though her tone always seemed to emphasize the word new in a way that made Maya slightly uncomfortable. But Maya was used to being uncomfortable. She'd spent her entire life navigating spaces where she was the only one, or one of few. The only black student in her nursing cohort, the only black nurse on several of her hospital rotations, the only black homeowner on Maple Ridge Drive. She'd learned to read subtle cues, to measure her responses, to make herself just palatable enough to be accepted, but not so subdued that she disappeared entirely. With Catherine, she stayed friendly, but bounced. She accepted invitations to neighborhood gatherings, but kept her personal life private. She smiled and waved, but didn't linger in conversations. It was a dance she knew well, the performance of belonging in a place that wasn't sure it wanted you. Most of the other neighbors were polite but distant. The Hendersons, 2 doors down, had young children and barely had time to make eye contact. The Chengs across the street and 1 house over kept to themselves. Old Mr. Peterson at the corner walked his dog past her house every evening and always nodded, though he never spoke more than a few words. It was Catherine who seemed most invested in Maya's presence. Catherine who asked questions about her schedule, her family, whether she lived alone. Catherine who mentioned that the previous owners of Maya's house had been very quiet people, and wondered aloud whether Maya planned to have a lot of visitors. Maya had answered these questions with the practiced ease of someone who understood they were being assessed. Yes, she lived alone. No, she didn't plan on hosting loud parties. Yes, she worked long shifts, sometimes overnight. No, she didn't have family nearby. Each answer seemed to satisfy Catherine, who would nod and smile and say something like, "Oh, I'm sure you'll fit in just fine." But there was always something in Catherine's eyes, a calculation, a measurement, that made Maya wonder what fitting in actually meant on Maple Ridge Drive. Still, for 6 months, it worked. Maya went to work, came home, tended her small garden, painted her kitchen, and slowly transformed the house into something that felt like home. She made friends with a few nurses at the hospital, dated occasionally, though nothing stuck, and generally lived the quiet, unremarkable life of a woman trying to build something stable after years of instability. She thought she was succeeding. She thought she was safe. The shift had been brutal. 14 hours on her feet, 3 codes, 2 combative patients, and a physician who'd spoken to her like she was an intern instead of a nurse with 8 years of experience. Maya had driven home in silence, too tired even for music, watching the streetlights blur past her windshield like falling stars. It was 10:47 p.m. when she pulled into her driveway. The neighborhood was dark, except for the porch lights that glowed at measured intervals along the street. Catherine's house was lit up, every window bright, the porch light blazing. Maya noticed this in the vague way you notice things when exhaustion has dulled your senses. She grabbed her bag, locked the car, and walked up her front steps with the single-minded focus of someone who desperately needs to take off their shoes. She was inside for maybe 10 minutes, just long enough to drop her bag, peel off her scrubs, and pull on sweatpants and a t-shirt when her doorbell rang. The sound jolted her out of the fog of tiredness. Nobody rang doorbells this late unless something was wrong. She looked through the peephole and saw Catherine standing on her porch, arms crossed, face set in an expression Maya had never seen before. Not friendly, not warm, something else entirely. Maya opened the door but left the screen door latched. "Catherine, is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you about something." Catherine's voice was clipped, controlled. "I saw someone at your house earlier today, around 3 o'clock. A man. He was trying your door, looking in your windows." Maya's mind raced. She'd been at work since 6 a.m. What did he look like? Young, black, wearing a hoodie. Catherine's eyes locked onto Maya's with an intensity that felt almost aggressive. "I called out to him, asked what he was doing, and he ran off toward the back of your house. I thought you should know." The description hung in the air between them. Young, black, hoodie. The trifecta of American suspicion. "Did you call the police?" Maya asked carefully. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Do you know who it might have been?" Maya shook her head. "No, I can't think of anyone who—" "Because if it happens again, I will call the police." Catherine's tone shifted, became almost maternal again, but with an edge underneath. "We have to look out for each other in this neighborhood. There's been some problems lately. People who don't belong here, wandering around." People who don't belong here. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I appreciate you letting me know. I'll keep an eye out." "You do that." Catherine turned to leave, then paused at the bottom of the porch steps. "You know, Maya, I told the other neighbors when you moved in that you seemed like one of the good ones. I'd hate to be wrong about that." She walked away before Maya could respond, crossing the street to her bright, glowing house like a queen returning to her castle. Maya closed the door and locked it, then stood in her dark living room trying to process what had just happened. One of the good ones. The phrase echoed in her mind, each word a small violence. She wanted to believe Catherine had meant well, that the warning had been genuine concern. But something about the interaction felt wrong, staged almost, like Catherine had been waiting for an opportunity to say something she'd been holding back. Maya checked all her windows and doors. Nothing seemed disturbed, no signs of forced entry or attempted break-ins. She considered calling her brother, who lived 2 hours away, but what would she say? "My neighbor told me a suspicious black man was at my house, and now I feel like the walls are closing in?" She went to bed but didn't sleep well. 2 days later, she came home from a morning shift to find a note in her mailbox. It was written on nice stationery, the kind with flowers printed along the border. The handwriting was feminine, precise. "Maya, just a friendly reminder that we have noise ordinances in this neighborhood. Last night your music was quite loud past 10 p.m. Please be more considerate of your neighbors. Thank you. Catherine." Maya stared at the note in confusion. She'd been at work last night until midnight. Her house had been empty, dark, silent. She walked across the street and knocked on Catherine's door. It took a moment, but Catherine answered, already smiling, that practiced smile. "Maya, what can I do for you? I got your note about the noise, but I wasn't home last night. I worked a late shift." Catherine's smile didn't waver. "Are you sure? I distinctly heard music coming from your house around 10:30. "I'm positive. I was at the hospital until after midnight. You can call and verify if you want." Something flickered across Catherine's face. Annoyance, maybe? Or frustration that her certainty was being challenged. Well, perhaps it was coming from another house. Sound travels funny at night. But in the future, just be mindful. We're all trying to maintain the quality of life we moved here for. The emphasis on we felt deliberate, exclusive. Maya nodded slowly. Of course. Have a good day, Catherine. She walked back to her house feeling a creeping unease that she couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something more insidious. The feeling of being watched, measured, found wanting, of not being trusted in a space you'd paid good money to occupy. The incidents continued. Small things, easily dismissed individually, but accumulating weight. Catherine mentioned to another neighbor within Maya's earshot that she'd seen unfamiliar cars parked in front of Maya's house at odd hours. Maya's coworker had picked her up for a carpool shift at 5 a.m. Catherine left another note about Maya's trash bins being left out too long. It had been collection day. Everyone's bins were still out. Catherine stopped waving in the mornings. The warm greetings evaporated into curt nods or averted eyes. Maya felt herself shrinking. She became hyper-aware of every action, how loud she closed her car door, whether her lawn was mowed to the exact length of her neighbors, whether she smiled enough or too much when she encountered other residents. The house that had felt like freedom began to feel like a glass cage, beautiful but fragile, with Catherine watching from across the street like a hawk tracking prey. Maybe this was never about music, or trash bins, or unfamiliar cars. Maybe this had always been about something else. One Saturday afternoon, Maya was in her front yard, planting flowers in the bed along her porch. The sun was warm on her shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. The smell of soil and new blooms reminded her of her grandmother's garden, of afternoons spent in the dirt making things grow. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Catherine approaching until she spoke.
"Those are lovely." Catherine stood at the edge of Maya's lawn, hands clasped in front of her. "Petunias?" "Geraniums," Maya said, sitting back on her heels, "and some lavender." Catherine surveyed the flower bed with an appraising eye. "You know, the HOA has guidelines about landscaping. Nothing too wild." Maya felt her jaw tighten. There was no HOA. She'd checked specifically when she bought the house. "I wasn't aware we had an HOA." "Well, it's more of an informal agreement. We all try to maintain a certain aesthetic. Cohesive, professional." Catherine's gaze swept from the flowers to Maya's house, to Maya herself, covered in dirt and sweat. Some plants can look a little unruly if not maintained properly. There it was again, the coded language, the subtle message wrapped in concern. "I'll keep that in mind," Maya said evenly, turning back to her flowers. Catherine didn't leave. She stood there for another long moment, watching, before finally saying, "I've been thinking. I may have been wrong about you. When you first moved in, I thought you'd be different, but I'm not so sure anymore." Maya looked up, trowel in hand. "Different from what?" "From the kind of people who usually cause problems in neighborhoods like this." Catherine's voice was calm, almost pleasant, as if she were discussing the weather. "The ones who move in, and suddenly the property values drop. The ones who bring in elements we don't want around our children." The words landed like stones, heavy, undeniable. Maya stood slowly, dirt falling from her gloves. "I'm a nurse. I work 60 hours a week. I pay my mortgage on time. I mind my business. What exactly is the problem, Catherine?" "There's no problem yet." Catherine smiled that smile again, the one that had welcomed Maya 6 months ago, but now felt like a threat. "I'm just saying, we notice things. I notice things. And if I start noticing the wrong things, well, I'd hate for this to become uncomfortable for you." She walked away before Maya could respond, crossing back to her bright yellow house with its perfect garden and its perfect facade.
Maya stood in her yard, surrounded by her half-planted flowers, and felt something break inside her. Not snap. Breaking implies sudden violence. This was slower, more like erosion, the wearing away of hope under the constant pressure of being unwanted. She went inside, stripped off her gloves, and sat at her kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. That night, she called her brother. "She's trying to run you out," Marcus said flatly, after hearing the whole story. "That's what this is. She decided you don't belong there, and she's making it impossible for you to stay." "But why? I haven't done anything." "You existed. That was enough." Marcus's voice was tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "You think you're the first black person to buy a house in a white neighborhood and have this happen? Come on, Maya, you're smarter than that." She was. She just wanted so badly to believe things could be different. "What do I do?" "You got cameras?" "No." "Get cameras. Document everything. Every interaction. Every note. Every time she so much looks at you sideways. Because eventually she's going to escalate. And when she does, you need proof." Maya ordered cameras that night. They arrived 2 days later, and she spent an afternoon installing them at her front door, back door, and facing the street. The presence of the cameras should have made her feel safer. Instead, they felt like an admission of siege. The next escalation came 3 weeks later. Maya was pulling out of her driveway, heading to a night shift, when she noticed Catherine standing in her front yard with another woman, Mrs. Henderson, from down the street. They were talking animatedly, both looking toward Maya's house. As Maya drove past, she saw Catherine gesture toward her car, saying something that made Mrs. Henderson nod gravely. When Maya returned home the next morning, there was a police car parked across the street. Her heart seized immediately, but the officer was just talking to Catherine on her porch. They both turned to look when Maya pulled into her driveway. The officer, young, white, with the kind of clean-cut look that suggested military background, walked over as Maya got out of her car. "Excuse me, ma'am, Officer Daniels, do you live here?" "Yes." Maya kept her hands visible, her movements slow. Years of conditioning in how to interact with police while black. "Is there a problem?" "Your neighbor called about a possible break-in. Said she saw someone tampering with your back door yesterday evening." Maya felt her stomach drop. "I was at work yesterday evening, from 6 to 6. She pulled out her phone, showing him her hospital badge photo and schedule. "No one should have been at my house." The officer examined her phone, then looked back at Catherine's house, where Catherine stood watching from her porch. "Mind if I check your property? Make sure everything's secure?" "Of course." They walked the perimeter of her house together. Every window was intact. Every door was locked and showed no signs of tampering. The camera footage, which Maya pulled up on her phone, showed nothing but squirrels and a mail carrier. "Everything looks fine," Officer Daniels said, though he seemed slightly uncomfortable now. "Maybe your neighbor was mistaken." "Maybe." Maya chose her words carefully. "Officer, this isn't the first time she's reported something that didn't happen. A few weeks ago, she said someone suspicious was at my house. Before that, she complained about noise when my house was empty. I have cameras now that prove nothing happened yesterday." Something shifted in the officer's expression, recognition, perhaps, of a pattern he'd seen before. "I'll make a note of it," he said finally. "If it happens again, let us know." But they both understood the reality. If it happened again, Catherine would be the one calling. Her word against Maya's. Her 20 years in the neighborhood against Maya's 6 months. After the officer left, Maya sat on her porch and watched Catherine watch her from across the street. Neither of them waved. The breaking point came in October, on an evening when the light filtered through the trees in shades of amber and gold, when the air smelled like wood smoke and dying leaves. Maya had just gotten home from work, still in her scrubs, exhausted from a shift that had included 2 traumas and a hostile family member who'd accused her of not caring enough about their dying relative. She was pulling off her shoes when she heard voices outside, loud, agitated. She looked out her window and saw Catherine in her front yard with 3 other neighbors, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, and another man Maya didn't recognize. They were standing in a cluster, and Catherine was holding what looked like a clipboard. Maya's phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey, I can't really talk right now." "I'm looking at your camera feed." Marcus's voice was tight. "There's a group of people outside your house. What's going on?" Maya had given her brother access to her security cameras after the last police visit. "I don't know. Let me call you back." She went outside, still in her scrubs, and walked down her driveway. The conversation stopped immediately. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward her. "Can I help you with something?" Maya asked, forcing her voice to stay level. Catherine stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Maya, we're circulating a petition. There have been concerns about activities at your property." "What activities?" "Multiple disturbances, suspicious individuals, possible illegal behavior." Catherine's voice was calm, rehearsed. "Several neighbors have expressed discomfort. We're asking the property management company to conduct an investigation." "There is no property management company. I own my house."
"Then we'll be filing complaints with the city, and if necessary, we'll pursue legal action for maintaining a nuisance property." Catherine held up the clipboard. Several signatures were already scrawled across the top page. "This is about protecting our community." Maya looked at the other neighbors. Mrs. Henderson wouldn't meet her eyes. The Changs looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The other man, tall, red-faced, arms crossed, stared at Maya with undisguised hostility. "What disturbances?" Maya asked. "What suspicious individuals? I work 12-hour shifts at a hospital. I come home, I sleep, I go back to work. What exactly am I doing that's so threatening?" "We don't have to justify our concerns to you," the red-faced man said. "We have a right to feel safe in our neighborhood." And there it was, the word that had been circling this entire situation from the beginning. Safe. They didn't feel safe with her here. "I'm a nurse," Maya said quietly. "I save lives. What about me makes you feel unsafe?" No one answered, but the silence itself was the answer. Catherine lowered the clipboard. "This doesn't have to be contentious. If you chose to sell your property and relocate somewhere more suitable, this could all go away. I'm sure you'd be happier somewhere where you fit in better." Something cold and clear settled over Maya. She looked at each of them in turn. These neighbors who had decided, based on nothing but her existence, that she was a threat, that she didn't belong, that her presence somehow diminished them. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya said. "This is my home. I bought it legally. I pay my taxes. And I've done nothing wrong. If you want to waste your time on a petition against a woman whose only crime is going to work every day, that's your choice. But I'm not leaving." She turned and walked back into her house, closing the door firmly behind her. Her hands were shaking. Her breath came in short gasps. But she'd said it. She'd drawn her line. Through the window, she watched the group disperse, Catherine lingering longest, staring at Maya's house with an expression of pure, calculated fury. Maya called Marcus back. "They're trying to force me out." "I know. I heard the whole thing. Your camera audio is pretty good." He paused. "You need a lawyer." "I can't afford." "You can't afford not to. This is harassment. This is a campaign to drive you out of your home. And it's based on nothing but racism. Document everything. Get legal help. Because Catherine isn't going to stop until she wins or you make her stop." That night, Maya barely slept. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and groan of the house. Around 3 a.m., she heard a sound outside, a sharp crack, like something breaking. She pulled up her security camera footage on her phone. Catherine was in Maya's front yard, standing perfectly still, staring directly at the camera. Just standing there, watching. The image was grainy in the infrared light, but the message was clear. "I'm watching you. always watching. Maya saved the footage and added it to the growing folder on her laptop, labeled Evidence. The next morning, still exhausted, she left for work at 5 a.m. As she backed out of her driveway, she saw Catherine's porch light flick on, saw Catherine's silhouette in her window, always watching. Maybe this was never about race, though of course it was. Maybe it was about dignity, about the right to exist in a space you'd earned without constantly justifying your existence, about the exhausting, degrading reality of being unwanted in a place that should have been home. But Maya was tired of maybe, tired of qualifying, tired of trying to understand the psychology of people who wanted her gone simply because she existed. She drove to work and saved lives and came home to a battlefield. That was the reality now. That was what Catherine Sullivan had created. The war wasn't over, but Maya was no longer pretending it wasn't happening.
The night everything came to a head, the night 3 police cruisers sat in Maya's driveway, started like any other. Maya had worked a double shift, covering for a coworker whose child was sick. She'd come home after midnight, so tired she could barely think straight. She'd microwaved leftovers, eaten standing at her kitchen counter, and collapsed into bed with her scrubs still on. She woke to red and blue lights strobing through her bedroom window. For a moment, one disoriented, heart-stopping moment, she thought she was dreaming. But the lights were real. The sound of car doors and radio static was real. And when she looked out her window and saw Catherine pointing toward her house, that was real too. Maya pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie over her scrubs. Her hands shook as she laced her shoes. This was it, the escalation Marcus had warned her about. Catherine had finally made the move she'd been building toward. The doorbell rang. Then someone knocked, loud, official. "Police, open the door!" Maya took 3 deep breaths, the same kind she took before running a code, and opened the door with her hands visible. 3 officers stood on her porch. Behind them, she could see Catherine in her yard, arms crossed, watching with that expression of righteous concern Maya had learned to despise. "Ma'am, we received a report that this residence has been involved in drug activity," the lead officer said. He was older than the others, with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. "We need to ask you some questions." "Drug activity?" Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who reported that?" "We're not at liberty to say." "Have you—" It was Catherine Sullivan. Maya gestured toward where Catherine stood. "My neighbor. She's been harassing me for months, making false reports. I'm a nurse at County General. I work night shifts. I've never done drugs in my life. I can provide employment verification, drug test records from my hospital, whatever you need." The officer's expression shifted slightly. "Ma'am, we still need to— I have cameras." Maya's phone was in her pocket. She pulled it out slowly, showing them the screen. "I have footage of every day for the past 6 weeks. Front door, back door, street view. You can review all of it. You'll see me going to work and coming home. That's it. That's all I do." One of the younger officers leaned in to look at the phone. Maya pulled up the footage from the past 24 hours. Her leaving for work, her car gone all day, her returning after midnight. No visitors, no suspicious activity. Just a tired woman going to work and coming home. "Can we come inside?" the lead officer asked, but his tone had changed. Less aggressive, more uncertain. "Yes, but I'd like this on record." Maya's voice was calm, but inside she was screaming. "I'm cooperating fully. You'll find nothing because there's nothing to find, and I want it noted that this is the 4th false report from that neighbor." The officers came inside. They walked through her small house, her tidy living room with its second-hand furniture and framed nursing degree on the wall, her kitchen with a week's worth of meal prep containers in the fridge, her bedroom with hospital scrubs hanging in the closet and nursing journals on the nightstand. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. The lead officer stood in her living room looking uncomfortable.
Ma'am, I apologize for the disturbance. There's clearly no evidence of illegal activity here. No, there isn't. Maya's voice cracked just slightly. There never was. Catherine Sullivan has been trying to force me out of this neighborhood since I moved in. She's made false noise complaints, false reports of suspicious activity, organized a petition against me, and now this, a drug accusation. Do you understand what that could do to me? I'm a nurse. My career depends on my reputation. One false accusation in my file and—
She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The officer saw it anyway. The fear, the exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of fighting a battle she shouldn't have to fight. "I'll be filing a formal complaint," Maya said, "against Catherine Sullivan for filing false police reports. And if this happens again, I'll get a restraining order. I've documented everything. Every interaction, every note, every lie. I'm done being silent." The officers left. Maya stood on her porch and watched them drive away, watched them stop briefly to speak with Catherine. Through the distance and the darkness, Maya saw Catherine's confident posture falter, saw her gestures become more defensive, saw the officers hand her something, a warning maybe, or information about filing false reports. When the police left, Catherine stayed in her yard for a long moment, staring at Maya across the street. Then she turned and went inside, her bright house swallowing her up. Maya went inside too. She sat on her couch in the darkness and cried, not from fear, but from relief, from rage, from the sheer exhaustion of constantly having to prove her right to exist. The next morning, Maya filed formal complaints with both the police department and the city. She attached her camera footage, her hospital records, her work schedule, and a detailed timeline of Catherine's harassment. Marcus connected her with a civil rights lawyer who took one look at the evidence and said, "This is textbook racial harassment. We have a case." Within a week, Catherine received a cease and desist letter. Within 2 weeks, the police department issued a formal warning about filing false reports. Within a month, Catherine's house went up for sale. Maya watched from her window as the "for sale" sign went up in Catherine's yard, watched as Catherine loaded boxes into a moving truck, watched as the woman who had tried so hard to drive her out was driven out instead. They never spoke again. When Catherine finally drove away, leaving her perfect yellow house behind, she didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge Maya standing on her own porch, in front of her own house, in the space she had fought to keep. The evening light filtered through the trees in amber ribbons. A car door slammed somewhere down the street, just a neighbor coming home from work. The sound was sharp but no longer threatening, just punctuation in a normal day. Maya stood at her window looking out at Maple Ridge Drive. The street looked the same, tree-lined, quiet, beautiful in the fading light. But it felt different now. It felt like hers. She thought about all the small battles that had led to this moment. The notes and the complaints and the petition. The nights lying awake wondering if she should just give up and leave. The constant calculation of how to exist without provoking. The exhausting performance of being non-threatening while demanding respect. She'd won, but the victory felt heavy, because she knew she was one of the lucky ones. She'd had resources, cameras, documentation, a lawyer, a brother who supported her. How many others had faced the same harassment and simply left, too worn down to fight? How many Catherine Sullivans were out there right now making life unbearable for people who just wanted to live? But tonight she didn't want to think about that. Tonight she wanted to stand in her house, in her space, and simply exist, without performance, without fear, without apology. She made dinner, something simple but good. She put on music, something she actually liked, not just what she thought wouldn't bother the neighbors. She sat on her porch as the sun set, watching her street become a watercolor of shadows and light. And for the first time since moving in, she felt at home.
Catherine Sullivan wasn't who she claimed to be.
She claimed to be a friendly neighbor, a concerned citizen, someone who just wanted to maintain the character of her community. But beneath the banana bread and the polite greetings was something darker. A woman who believed she had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. Who weaponized comfort and safety as excuses to harass. Who hid prejudice behind a smile and a floral print dress. Maya's story isn't unique. Across this country, people are fighting these same battles. In neighborhoods, in workplaces, in spaces they've earned the right to occupy. They're facing the Catherine Sullivans of the world, people who smile while they sharpen knives, who speak in coded language about property values and the wrong element, who call the police on their neighbors for the crime of existing while different. But Maya's story is also a reminder that documentation matters, that standing firm matters, that refusing to be erased matters. She could have left, many people would have, but she stayed and fought, and in fighting she reclaimed not just her home, but her dignity. The question isn't whether these battles are fair. They're not. The question isn't whether people should have to fight them. They shouldn't. The question is, when you witness it happening, what will you do? If you've ever felt unwelcome in a place you belonged, you're not alone. If you've ever wondered whether you were imagining the hostility, whether you were being too sensitive, whether you should just keep your head down and hope things get better, know that your instincts are probably right. Trust them. Document. Persist. Fight. And if you've never experienced this kind of harassment, if you've never had to prove your right to exist in a space you paid for, pay attention. The Catherine Sullivans of the world operate in silence and complicity. They count on people looking away, on benefit of the doubt, on I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. Mean it. Call it out. Be the neighbor who says this isn't okay. Because somewhere right now, someone is standing in their home wondering if they should just leave, wondering if it's worth the fight, wondering if anyone sees what's happening to them. Let them know they're not invisible. Let them know they're not alone. What would you have done if you were Maya's neighbor? Would you have spoken up? Would you have stood silent? Would you have signed the petition? Subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind everyday injustice. Because the only thing worse than the Catherine Sullivans of the world is a neighborhood that lets them win.